Good afternoon, listeners, and welcome back to your afternoon broadcast, where we keep you company as the workday crawls toward evening. It's Thursday, which means we've got your full weather update coming up, a peek at what's happening downtown this weekend, and, if you're feeling lucky, our trivia call-in contest is back with gift cards to give away. But first, let's talk weather. Mild today. A little warmer than usual for this time of year, but nothing out of the ordinary. The sky over the city is clear, the winds are calm, and, excuse me for that, seems our signals had a hiccup. Nothing to worry about. As always, we'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind today? Give us a call, tell us how you're doing, or just say hi. Let's ease into the hour with a classic track from the vault. Something to unwind to while the world spins quietly around us. Stay tuned, stay comfortable. We're right here with you. Well, that's a first. Not sure if you all heard that, but we had a little visitor in the wires just now. Static's a funny thing. Sometimes it's the weather, sometimes it's the station. Next door bleeding into our frequency. And sometimes it just happens. Speaking of weather, our meteorologists say we're in for a strange atmospheric shift over the next few hours. Solar winds acting up, a little electromagnetic interference expected. Nothing major, just enough to make radios like ours burp out some static now and then. All right, that one even made me jump a little. Don't worry, folks, no ghosts in the machine, just the joys of running live radio. If you're hearing anything weird on your end, double voices, strange hums, let us know. The tech guys love a mystery they can solve. All right, we're going to roll right into traffic updates, unless our ghostly co-host wants to chime in first. Caller, hey, are you guys seeing this? Outside? Host, seeing what? Caller, the sky. It's wrong. Okay, let's not all jump on the prank train at once, folks. What's wrong with the sky? Caller, it's yellow, like the color of old paper. And the birds. There's so many of them. They're flying west in these huge swarms. My cows... Caller's voice breaks up. Caller. 2. I'm seeing it too. Not just birds. My dog's losing its mind, barking at nothing. All the animals seem off. All right, let's check this live. We've got our weather desk standing by. Meteorologist. We're seeing an unusual pressure shift sweeping east to west. Not typical. The color shift in the sky could be atmospheric dust, but the patterns are strange. We don't have a full explanation yet. Okay. So this is one of those times where we don't have all the answers yet, but we're not going anywhere. If you're seeing something strange where you are, call us. If your animals are acting up, if you feel like something's off, we want to know. The sky's still there, the ground's still under us, and we're still here with you. And we're back. Hopefully that static's sorted itself out, and you can hear me loud and clear. We've lined up another classic track to carry us through the next few minutes. Something to take the edge off. It's funny how a familiar song can make the world feel normal, even when it's not. Except there's something underneath. Do you hear that? Right there. Under the music. Not feedback, not static. It's words. Faint. Layered. We've had callers mention it already. A sort of whispering buried under the songs. Too soft to make out. But too deliberate to ignore. I thought maybe it was a faulty channel bleed. Sometimes you pick up bits of other stations sharing the frequency. But this doesn't sound like any language I know. Our sound engineer says the signal's clean on our end. There's nothing playing in the background, nothing feeding into the broadcast. But if you're hearing it too, those voices, you're not alone. And now that I've heard them, I can't unhear them. They slip through the silence between words, like something pressing its fingers against the edges of the signal. If you're picking up the whispers, call in. Maybe together we can figure out what they're saying. Or maybe we shouldn't. You know, every time there's some weird weather, or strange technical glitch, people love to say it's the end of the world. Solar flares? Apocalypse? Weird sky? Apocalypse. Static on the radio? Obviously a prophecy. It's a little running joke in this business. Radio people? We thrive on paranoia. But it's harmless, usually. Except today I made the joke and nobody laughed. Not me. Not the tech guys, not even you. Because today the sky turned the color of old bones. The birds fled west like they knew something we don't. And now the whispers are real, not just in our heads, but buried inside the signal itself. I'm supposed to tell you it's fine, that there's a logical explanation, that these things happen, but I can't seem to say those words without my throat closing up. So here's the joke. Ready? What do you call a radio station that accidentally broadcasts the end of the world? I don't have a punchline. Just the static and the silence and the feeling that something's already listening. Hold on. The boards just flashed. Every transmitter in our network just dropped signal for 3 full seconds. That's impossible. Even during storms, we can keep a trickle going. But this was a clean cut. Like someone flipped a switch and shut every mouth at once. I'm watching the monitors now. They're flickering. Numbers rolling over like a countdown I didn't start. If you're still hearing me, you should know. The emergency frequency just activated on its own. We didn't trigger it. And when I tried to override, it rejected my clearance code. We have a protocol for disasters, earthquakes, war, even power grid collapse. But this isn't on any checklist. We're supposed to tell you to stay calm, stay inside, trust the authorities. But I can't even tell you who's in charge of this anymore. Because right now, our emergency channel isn't broadcasting words. It's just a tone. Low, steady, endless. The kind of tone you feel in your teeth. And underneath it, yes, the whispers are still there, louder now, like they're rising to the surface. I think, no, I know. This signal isn't ours anymore. Something else is holding the mic, and whatever it is, it doesn't need us to talk. It just needs us to listen. This is your afternoon broadcast, or what's left of it. We're back on air after, well, I'm not even sure what to call it. A blackout? A systems failure? All I know is the signal dropped cold, like something reached in and turned off the world for a moment, and now we're back. But nothing feels right. I'm not gonna lie to you, my hands are shaking. I've worked this booth for years, through storms, riots, even that chemical spill back in 2009. But I've never felt this. It's like the air itself is heavier, like the silence has weight pressing against my chest. The phones are dead, the emergency line's offline, and I can't reach the station manager. It's just me and this mic and whatever's waiting on the other side of this frequency. If you're still hearing me, if your radio still works, I need you to stay with me, because something just changed out there. I can feel it even in here, and we're not the only ones noticing. Reports are already flooding in. It's not just this city, it's happening everywhere. Hold on, the newsroom just patched something through. You need to hear this. We're getting live reports from every corner of the country, and it's all the same story. Cities are losing power, not neighborhood blackouts. I mean, full grids going dark. It started in Europe. Major cities plunged into silence within minutes. No warnings, just gone. Then it spread east, rolling like a wave. Moscow, Beijing, New Delhi, darkness swallowing them one by one. The satellites aren't doing much better. Multiple agencies are reporting flickering telemetry, like the sky itself is blinking. Entire orbital systems are glitching out, GPS signals vanishing midstream. Even weather satellites can't hold a stable feed. And it's not a technical failure. Experts say there's no mechanical fault. No solar flare strong enough to do this. Whatever's shutting down the world, it's something else. Some say it's cyber warfare. Some say it's an attack. And then there are the others, the ones calling into whatever stations are still up, saying this isn't human at all. They say it's biblical. They say it's prophecy. I'd laugh if my throat didn't feel so dry. I don't know what's real yet. Only that every second we're on air, we're threading a needle between order and collapse. And I can feel that needle trembling under my hand. Stand by, because the next voice you hear won't be mine. Religious leaders are flooding the emergency channels, and they're not asking permission to speak. I need you to understand what's happening right now. Every major religious broadcaster, every preacher, every prophet, every self-proclaimed messenger of God, they've taken over emergency frequencies across the country. I'm not talking about standard programming. This is something else. They're overriding emergency systems, legally impossible, technically forbidden, and yet here they are, voices cascading over each other like waves on a breaking shore. They're all saying the same thing. The first seal has broken. The rider on the white horse has come. They quote the book of Revelation, voice after voice, calling it conquest. Not by war, but by influence, a force that bends nations without firing a single shot. They say this is only the beginning, the first in a chain of unraveling. I can't tell if they believe it or if they're just riding the panic like a wave. But the effect is the same. You can feel the fear climbing through the frequency, filling the space between words. Some of them name a date. Others say the date doesn't matter because time itself is already broken. I don't know what to believe. But I do know this. The more they talk, the more that whisper beneath the static grows louder. And I swear, just for a second, I thought I heard it say my name. Stay with me. Stay on this frequency. Because whatever happens next, we're going to face it together. Even if the world falls completely silent. They've been waiting for this. The voices on the fringe, the conspiracy podcasts, the anonymous message boards, the callers who've spent years connecting dots nobody else could see. They didn't just expect this moment. They counted on it. And now they're everywhere. They've hijacked the few working channels left, feeding off the fear like vultures over a battlefield. Every theory they ever whispered into late-night broadcasts is exploding into daylight. Only this time, no one's laughing. They say the government knew, that the seals, the horsemen, the whole prophecy, it was written into classified documents decades ago. Project Omega, the Lamb Report, the 7 Cycle Contingency. Names that were ridiculed as hoaxes are suddenly all anyone can talk about. They're saying the power outages, the satellite failures, they were allowed to happen. Controlled collapse designed to reset the world under the banner of the first rider. Conquest, without a single bullet fired. And I know what you're thinking. It's just fear talking. But fear has a funny way of spreading faster than facts. And when fear takes over, the next step is always the same. Survival. That's why the supermarkets aren't safe anymore. That's why people are turning on each other, not because they believe the prophecy, but because they believe no one is coming to save them. And honestly, I'm not sure they're wrong. If you're still listening and you're thinking about heading out for supplies, don't. The calls we're getting now, the ones that still come through the static, they're not just people asking what's happening. They're warning us. Every grocery store, every gas station, every supply depot has become a war zone. Neighbors who've lived next to each other for years are fighting like strangers at the edge of starvation. It started with water, cases snatched right out of shopping carts. Then it was canned food, medical supplies, batteries. But now, it doesn't matter what's on the shelf. People are fighting for anything, not because they need it, but because taking it makes them feel in control. We had one caller, elderly man, voice shaking, said his neighbor broke into his house with a crowbar over a bag of rice. Another woman called screaming that someone in her neighborhood was spray painting crosses on the homes of people they thought were unmarked. I don't know what unmarked even means, but whatever it is, it's turning survival into something personal. And through all of this, the fights, the violence, the fear, that sound keeps bleeding through the broadcasts. The whisper beneath the static. It's louder now, clearer, like something standing just outside the edge of every frequency, waiting for us to finally hear what it's been saying all along. I don't want to scare you more than you already are, but if you have food, if you have water, if you have anything, keep it close. Because the seals aren't the only thing breaking. We are breaking too. I can't do this anymore. I know I'm supposed to be the voice of calm, the professional who keeps you steady when the world shakes itself apart. But I'm not that man right now. I'm just someone sitting alone in a studio, watching the sky darken through a window I can't look away from. I used to think prophecy was for the desperate, for people who needed to believe the universe had a plan. But now I can't not believe it. Every seal they warned about, it's happening exactly the way they said. And I know what's coming next. I thought we had more time. I thought the horsemen were just metaphors, old stories wrapped in fire and brimstone. But they're not stories. They're already here. And if I'm saying this out loud, live on air. That should tell you how close we are to the edge. The Vatican went live 15 minutes ago. Their first official statement since the world started unraveling. I've never heard so many prayers spoken so quickly, one layered over the next, until it sounded like a river of words pouring through the speakers. The Pope himself was mid-sentence, something about faith being our final shield. When the feed cut off, no warning, no technical glitch, it just stopped. And then, over the emergency frequency, something else came through. Not words, not a voice. It was a trumpet, clear, impossibly loud, as if the sky itself had opened its throat and screamed into every speaker on earth. If you've read the book of Revelation, you know what the trumpets mean. I always thought they were symbolic. I don't think that anymore. I don't know what comes after a sound like that, but if you can still hear me, if you're still out there, just hold on, because I'm staying right here at this mic until the next sound comes, no matter what it is. I need you to listen carefully. The emergency broadcast network just came back online, and it's not the usual calm, robotic voice reading disaster instructions. This time, it's chaos. Reports are flooding in from every corner of the country. Violent clashes erupting everywhere. This isn't organized protest, and it's not looting like we've seen after storms. This is something else. Neighbors turning on neighbors. People who've known each other for years, friends, co-workers, even family. Suddenly tearing into each other like enemies on a battlefield. Law enforcement can't keep up. Most officers abandoned their posts to protect their own families. The ones still out there are overwhelmed. They're calling for backup, for help, for anything. But no one's answering. What started as fear has turned into fury. And it's not just survival instincts kicking in, it's personal. People are accusing each other of hiding supplies, of being marked or unmarked. No one even knows what that means. But once the accusation is made, fists start flying. And beneath it all, underneath the screaming and the breaking glass, there's something else. I know you've heard it too. That low vibration, like a voice too deep for words, humming beneath every frequency. It's not stopping. I need you to hold on, because this is nowhere near over. And the next part is even worse. What happens when people stop believing help is coming? They stop waiting. We're getting first-hand reports from callers who tried to make supply runs, people who thought they could sneak into a store, grab a few cans, and get home before things got ugly. None of them made it home intact. One woman said the grocery store parking lot looked like a battlefield. People weren't just grabbing food, They were fighting over it with knives, bats, even their bare hands. Another caller described driving past a gas station where the attendants had barricaded themselves inside. Armed customers pounded on the glass, screaming that they had families to feed, that they couldn't go home empty-handed. Civility isn't eroding, it's already gone. Entire neighborhoods have sealed themselves off, turning homes into fortresses. People are marking their own doors with symbols they barely understand, convinced it will protect them from whatever's coming next. And it's not just fear of hunger or thirst driving them. It's that feeling of the one none of us can name, but we all recognize. The sense that something larger than survival is at stake. They're not just fighting for food. They're fighting for some shred of meaning, some sign that they still matter in a world coming apart at the seams. I don't know how to stop it, but I know where it started. I need you to hear this, because the police scanners just gave us the clearest warning yet. If you've never listened to a police scanner before, you need to understand. It's not designed for the public. It's raw, unscripted, and in moments like this, it's the only place you'll hear the truth before anyone tries to rewrite it. The scanners are flooded right now. Dispatchers trying to track officers who vanished. Panicked voices calling in sightings of riders, actual riders, moving through the skies over cities. Not helicopters, not drones, riders on horseback. You think it's hysteria? I thought so too, until every report described the same thing. A burning sword hovering above the city's edge, its flame cutting across the sky like a seam being ripped open. One officer broke down mid-transmission. He kept saying the same phrase over and over. The Red Rider is already here. I don't know what he saw, but his voice cracked wide open when he said it. Like something inside him broke just from looking. This isn't just panic or mob violence. This is something else. Something reaching into people's minds, twisting their fear into prophecy, turning their hands into weapons against each other. And if you think staying inside keeps you safe, you haven't heard what's next, because that burning sword, it's moving. Stay with me. I need you to hear what happens next. I want you to know exactly what they're saying. The people at the top, the ones who still think words can put this fire out. The official statement came through moments ago. Government scientists, public safety spokespeople, the whole polished parade. They stood behind their podiums, voices steady, smiles rehearsed. They're calling it solar flare-induced psychosis. They say the solar storm we heard about weeks ago was stronger than expected. Electromagnetic disturbances interfering with brain activity, causing hallucinations, panic responses, even group delusions. They're saying the rider in the sky, the burning sword, even the violence. All of it is a collective breakdown, triggered by environmental stress. They want you to believe this is just biology cracking under pressure. That if you just breathe, hydrate, and stay inside, your mind will settle, and the world will make sense again. But here's what they don't explain. Why every hallucination matches scripture word for word. Why people thousands of miles apart are seeing the exact same figure, hearing the same prophecy, dreaming the same ending. They say this is science. But you and I both know science doesn't whisper in your ear when the power's out. Science doesn't leave hoofprints in the sky. And the worst part? They sound scared too. You can hear it beneath the polish, just under the surface of every word they say. Like they know they're lying. And they know we know. Stay with me, because you need to hear what my callers are saying. And they're not hallucinating. They're witnessing. The phone lines came back, briefly, just long enough for me to hear their voices. And if you're still clinging to the official story, I need you to forget every word they said, because every caller, every single one, saw the same thing. A rider in red draped in something torn and ancient, moving slow through the sky, trailing a sword that burns at both ends. They say the air felt thicker as it passed overhead, like it wasn't just moving through the sky, it was parting reality itself. One woman said the sword carved a line over her house. And now her family won't speak, just sit staring at the walls, lips moving like they're praying. Except the words aren't hers. Another man, a veteran who's seen war with his own eyes, said he woke up to find his front door marked with something red, smeared like blood but dry as ash. He said his hands are shaking, but not from fear, from recognition. They all described the same whisper too. The second seal is opened. They say they heard it in their heads, in their bones, in the static between every word I say. I know what you're thinking. Mass hysteria, right? Shared delusion. Except the first caller was from Ohio. The next from Berlin. The third from a fishing village in South Korea. Explain that. And now we have our own visitor. I need you to stay with me because I don't want to face this alone. Our station security feed glitched about 10 minutes ago. Just a flicker at first, like interference. Then it locked onto something standing at our front door. It's a figure, dressed in red, just standing there. Still as stone. No weapon, no movement. Just watching. We tried to ping the security system, maybe reset the feed, but every time the cameras refresh, it's closer. Not walking, just closer. And now, it's at the glass. I can't see its face. I can't even tell if it has one. All I know is that the longer I look, the harder it gets to breathe. Like something's pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air out inch by inch. The feed just cut out completely, but before it did, the figure lifted its hand. I swear it pointed directly at the booth like it knew exactly where I was. The seal didn't just break out there. It's here now. It's at my door. And if you're still listening, I need you to understand. Whatever's coming next, it's already inside the signal. Stay with me. Don't turn the dial. Because if I'm going to disappear, I want someone to remember I was here. We knew this was coming. The supply chain was fragile long before today. One bad storm, one strike, one broken system, and everything would start to crack. But this isn't a crack. It's a collapse. I just spoke with a contact at the regional distribution center. They're out. Not low, not rationing, out. The truck stopped moving 2 days ago. Drivers abandoned rigs on the highway when the riots began. Some just disappeared, leaving the cargo behind like they knew it didn't matter anymore. Grocery stores emptied in hours, not days. Pharmacies, too. Even gas stations, cleaned out like locusts swept through, right down to the shelves themselves. What's left now is hunger, and the kind of fear that hunger breeds. The lines outside relief centers stretch for blocks, but the food they're waiting for isn't coming. What happens when a mother stands in that line for 6 hours and goes home empty-handed? What happens when a father realizes there's nothing left to steal? You already know. You've seen it. If you've stepped outside, or even just looked out your window, you've seen what hunger does when there's no hope left to hold it back. And through all of it, that whisper's still there. Under the static, behind every voice, threaded through every silence. It's not hunger talking. It's the seal, the third seal. And if you think the government's about to save us, you haven't heard what they're planning next. Just now, the emergency broadcast system pushed out a message. The kind you're not supposed to hear from me first. It's supposed to come from them. But they've lost control of the airwaves, so I'll say it for them. There will be government food drops at designated sites across the region. These are the final coordinated deliveries. The last lifeline before whatever's left is rationed into nothing. The broadcast gave times, locations, and stern warnings to remain calm. They say there's enough for everyone, but we both know that's a lie. There's never enough for everyone. Within minutes of the announcement, the reports started coming in. The chaos at every drop site. The first truck didn't even make it to the parking lot before people swarmed it, climbing onto the trailer, tearing at boxes before the wheels stopped turning. At another site, the National Guard showed up to manage the crowd and ended up firing warning shots just to clear a path. It's no longer about getting food. It's about getting something Anything, just to feel like you won. Families are splitting apart in those lines. Neighbors are turning on each other just for a place closer to the front. The seal doesn't just starve you, it turns hunger into a weapon. And there's something else. Reports are coming in about the people who walk through the chaos untouched. People no one dares to fight. They're not guards. They're not soldiers. They're something else. And every single one of them is marked. You need to understand something. It's that this isn't just about hunger anymore. It's about the mark. The first report sounded ridiculous. Some guy claiming his neighbor came back from a food drop, eyes blank, skin cold to the touch, with something carved into his wrist. But now there are dozens of these calls. Same story, same mark, a shape burned into skin that won't wash off, like it was branded directly into the flesh. At first, people said it was some new government tracking system, a barcode for rations, something practical. But then they noticed something. The marked ones? They don't eat. They stand in line. They take their share, but no one ever sees them eat a bite. They just watch. Some say they don't even blink. They just stand there calm as the world collapses around them. Like they're already past hunger, past fear, past whatever's left of being human. I don't know if the mark is a blessing, a curse, or something in between. I only know the people who have it don't fight. They don't panic. They don't run. And for reasons no one can explain, the crowd parts for them every time. The seal didn't just bring famine, it brought division between the marked and the unmarked, between those who still fear hunger and those who've already surrendered to something far worse. And if that mark is what I think it is, survival might not be the blessing you hope for. Stay with me, because the fourth seal is already waiting in the wings. We've had religious callers before, doomsday preachers, prophecy obsessives. It comes with the job. Most of the time, they're just noise. But not today. The calls started flooding in after the first reports of the marks, the ones appearing on people's skin after food drops. But this wasn't just speculation or paranoia. The callers were reading straight from Scripture. Revelation, chapter and verse, describing the mark of the beast. They say the seal doesn't just bring famine, it brings a choice. Accept the mark and you survive. Reject it and you starve. It sounded insane when the first caller said it. By the fifth, it sounded inevitable. The terrifying part? Every mark is identical. A twisted ancient symbol that nobody remembers learning, but every single person recognizes the moment they see it. One caller swore the mark moved beneath his skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. Another claimed it only appeared after her husband ate the government rations. Food that tasted metallic, like something tainted by the air itself. And the ones who are marked? They're changing. They stop eating. They stop speaking. They just wait. The lines between prophecy, conspiracy, and survival aren't just blurring anymore. They're gone. And now, even the skeptics are scared, because our next guest was brought in to disprove all of this. And if you think he's going to tell you it's nonsense, you're in for a very different kind of revelation. His name is Dr. Alan Price, physicist, rationalist, sworn enemy of everything supernatural. If anyone could cut through the hysteria, it was supposed to be him. He joined us live just minutes ago, fully prepared to explain away the marks, the famine, the hallucinations, all of it. And for a moment, it worked. His voice was calm, his tone confident. He talked about collective stress responses, chemical contamination in food supplies, the natural human tendency to find patterns in chaos. But then we played him the call from the man who saw the mark move under his skin, and Dr. Price fell completely silent. For almost a full minute, the line stayed open. Nothing but breathing. Then he whispered something so soft we almost missed it. I've seen it too. He didn't mean on the news. He didn't mean in a report. He meant on his own skin. He started to explain how the mark appeared after he ran a soil analysis near a food drop site, how it burned for hours, how it whispered to him in a voice he didn't recognize but somehow understood. Then live on air, Dr. Price, the man who built his career tearing apart religious hysteria, started to pray. Halfway through a sentence about solar contamination, he broke down, sobbing into the mic, whispering two words over and over. It's too late. It's too late. And then the line cut out. The world doesn't need scientists anymore. It needs witnesses. And the next sound that you're about to hear, I need you to listen carefully, because it's not static. It's something else. The first time we heard it, we thought it was a glitch, an audio artifact buried inside the emergency broadcast signal. But the sound didn't follow the usual patterns. It didn't loop, didn't distort like digital noise. It was too organic, too intentional. And now it's back, loud enough that everyone hears it, no matter where they are. It's the sound of hooves, not the clatter of horses running on pavement, but something heavier, slower, dragging across gravel or dry earth. Every time the signal flickers, the hooves return. 4 beats, perfectly spaced, like the heartbeat of something too ancient to rush. People are calling in from everywhere, saying the ground vibrates when they hear it. A man in Oklahoma swore his well water rippled with each step. A nurse in London said the pulse monitor on her patient's bedside synced perfectly to the rhythm, until the patient flatlined. I can't tell you what kind of horse makes a sound like that, but I can tell you this. The seal didn't just bring famine, it brought a herald. Somewhere, just outside the edge of hearing, the third horseman is riding, and I'm starting to think the whispers we've been hearing all along. They weren't warnings, they were instructions. I don't know what comes after this sound, but it's already moving toward us. Stay with me, because whatever's coming next is already inside the air. If you're still out there, still listening, I need you to know something. The phone lines are quiet now. Not broken, not overloaded, just quiet. There used to be voices filling this frequency. Angry voices, scared voices, people begging for answers, or just anyone to talk to. But now, it's mostly silence. The kind of silence that feels deliberate, like someone or something is holding its breath, waiting for the next sound. I can't tell if people have stopped calling because they gave up or because they're gone. But once in a while, a call still slips through. When I answer, the voice on the other end is always trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of being alone. One man, calling from his car, said his whole neighborhood vanished overnight. Not fled, not hiding, just gone. Houses unlocked, meals half-eaten, everything left exactly where it was. But no people, no pets, not even a sound. Another caller said she hadn't heard a human voice in so long. She started talking to her reflection, just to remember how. I told her I understood, because now it's just me here too, sitting in a booth, talking to silence, hoping silence isn't all that's left. So if you can still hear me, if my voice is the only thing keeping you tethered to the world, stay with me, because I don't think we're alone in the silence anymore. It started with one caller, then another, and another. People reciting passages from Revelation, word for word, clear as if they had memorized every line. But when I asked where they learned it, every one of them gave the same answer. They didn't. One woman swore she hadn't set foot in a church since childhood, but she recited chapter 6 perfectly. The breaking of the seals, the arrival of the horsemen, the famine, the plague. She said the words came to her like a memory she never lived, Another man, a truck driver who admitted he'd never opened a Bible in his life, whispered the exact verse about the red horse. Not just the words, the cadence, the rhythm, like he'd been chanting it in his sleep. It's not just religious hysteria, it's implantation. Raw scripture poured directly into the mind like a broadcast no one can turn off. Some callers cried as they spoke, others sounded disturbingly calm, like they'd accepted their role in whatever this is. The strangest part? They didn't just recite. They all paused at the same point, just before the prophecy reaches the fifth seal, as if something or someone is holding that last piece back. I don't know who's feeding these words into their heads, but I'm starting to wonder if it's the same voice that's been whispering in the static since the very beginning. And if it reaches me, I need you to promise you'll remember who I used to be. For years, I've been the rational voice on this frequency, the one who laughed off end of the world calls, the one who told you to trust science, not superstition. But I can't say that anymore. Not after what I've seen. Not after what I've heard inside my own head. I can't pretend this is stress or mass hysteria. I can't tell you these whispers are nothing, or that the marks are a glitch, or that the sky turning to brass was just weather. Because last night, after I signed off, I heard it for myself. The whisper. It knew my name. I sat here in the dark, fingers hovering over the mic, afraid to speak, afraid to move, because I knew if I said it out loud, if I admitted I believed, I'd never be able to go back. And now, here I am, saying it. I believe. Not because I want to, but because I don't have a choice. This isn't prophecy anymore, it's procedure. Something set in motion long before we were born, something that doesn't need our belief to be real. I used to think faith was for people who couldn't handle reality. Now I think faith is the only reason any of us are still clinging to reality at all. I don't know if I'll make it through the next hour. But if I don't, if my voice disappears into the static like all the others, you'll know why. And if you still don't believe me, listen closely, because the silence isn't empty. It's waiting. I knew this moment would come. The calls aren't just about prophecy anymore, now they're about blame. Some of you think this is by design, that the government didn't just see this coming, they caused it. That they engineered the collapse, the famine, the panic, the silence, and even the seals themselves, all for one purpose: control. The theory spreads faster than the famine itself, that the whispers and the static are manufactured signals. The marks appearing on skin are some kind of biometric tagging, and the so-called writers are military psyops projections meant to drive the population into submission. You call it Project Omega, the final protocol, the manufactured apocalypse designed not to destroy the world, but to own what's left. One caller claimed leaked documents proved this was discussed at a classified summit over 20 years ago. Another swore her father, an Air Force radio operator, intercepted signals matching the biblical trumpets long before this started. But the more I listen, the more one thing becomes clear. It doesn't matter if it's prophecy or conspiracy, because the fear feels exactly the same. And fear makes people easy to steer. Maybe that's the point. Maybe faith and fear are the only tools left to break a population already too tired to fight. And somewhere between the two, caught between revelation and regulation, is us. No answers, just questions, feeding on each other like fire. And now they want me to tell you which side is right. But all I have left to offer is silence. The phone lines are full again, but not with people looking for updates. Some of you are begging for prayers, saying it's the only thing left that might stop what's coming. Others are demanding proof, hard facts, science, something tangible to hold on to in the dark. But here, in this booth, with nothing but static between me and the outside world. I can't give you either. The prayers are just words, shouted into the same silence that swallowed the first seal. And the proof? Every rational explanation collapsed hours ago, crumbling under the weight of marks that shouldn't exist and voices that speak in languages no one alive should remember. So, what do you want from me? Do you want me to pray with you? Or do you want me to prove to you that none of this is real? Even though we both know I can't do that anymore. I used to think my job was to report the truth. Now, I'm just trying to survive it. Maybe belief itself has become a form of currency. Something you trade for comfort, whether it's faith in prophecy or faith in the idea that humans somehow are still in control. But if belief is all we have left, whose belief wins? The lines are still open, but I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. The last call came from a voice so shaken, I could barely understand him at first. He didn't give his name, didn't say where he was calling from, just started talking, like the words had been waiting too long and couldn't hold back any longer. He said he saw the fourth rider. Not in a dream, not in a vision, outside his window. He described it. The ashen horse, skin stretched tight like it had been riding too long in a world with no air left to breathe. The rider sat motionless, face obscured by something that wasn't quite a hood, wasn't quite a shadow. The air around it, he said it felt like a vacuum, like even the insects outside his window had stopped buzzing, stopped living, just to make room for this thing to pass. And then, voice cracking, the caller recited the prophecy. Not from memory, not from scripture, but like it was being fed to him in real time. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed with him. The line stayed open just long enough for me to hear the gunshot, a sharp crack over the airwaves. Then silence. No dial tone, no static, just absence, as if the frequency itself mourned the voice it lost. If you're still listening, if your hands are trembling as much as mine, you need to know. The fourth seal isn't coming. It's already here. This is the hardest update I've ever had to give you. The numbers are coming in faster than I can read them. And none of them make sense. These aren't battlefield casualties. There are no explosions, no fires, no collapsing buildings. People are just stopping. Collapsing in their homes, at their kitchen tables, mid-sentence on the phone. A man was found, slumped behind the wheel at a traffic light, hands resting calmly in his lap, engine still running. Another caller said she found her sister sitting upright on the couch, eyes closed, face peaceful, as if death came not like a thief, but like an old friend, taking her hand and leading her away. It's not violence. There's no sign of struggle, no wounds, no trauma, nothing. It's like their bodies just gave up all at once, like something reached inside and switched them off. Medical responders are overwhelmed, not just by the volume, but by the sheer impossibility of it. This isn't a virus. It's not poison. These people aren't sick. They're just gone. 1 second they're here, the next they're empty. And it's not localized. This wave of quiet death is spreading across the map. Cities reporting clusters of sudden collapses, like invisible fingers tracing patterns across the population. Whatever this is, it's not human. It's not even natural. It's like the air itself has been told to stop carrying life. And the silence left behind feels heavier every minute, like we're all waiting for our turn. Hold on, the hospitals are going live with their first official explanation. And you need to hear this. Doctors are calling it sudden synchronized cardiac arrest. Clusters of hearts stopping at the exact same time. in different bodies across miles. They're ruling out chemical agents. No toxins, no bioweapon, nothing the blood tests can explain. 1 minute the heart beats normally, the next it just decides to stop. No pain, no warning. Emergency responders are reporting something else. Something harder to explain. Every victim they find has the same expression. Not terror, not confusion, just acceptance, like they saw it coming. Like they knew the moment their time arrived and didn't fight it. Paramedics said they expected scenes of chaos, clutching chests, gasping for breath. But instead, they found people sitting calmly, hands folded, eyes closed, as if they simply let go. One nurse said she could almost feel it in the room, the weight of something standing nearby, unseen but undeniable, gently pressing its hand down on every heart until it stopped. Some of them died alone. Others died together, whole families slumped side by side. Like whatever this is, it doesn't discriminate. It only follows its order. And it's not over because the experts don't have answers, only theories. And the one they're leaning toward now is somehow even worse than prophecy. The official term is mass psychogenic cardiac cessation. But the doctors themselves have started calling it something else. Apocalypse syndrome. The theory goes like this. The human mind wasn't built to process the end of the world. It can handle disaster, famine, even war. But this, the collapse of meaning itself, it breaks something deeper than fear. It breaks the instinct to survive. According to this theory, once the seals broke, something in our collective mind gave up. Our brains couldn't find a future to latch onto. So the body simply let go. They're calling it psychogenic death, a chain reaction spreading not through infection, but through belief itself. When the mind is certain that death is inevitable, the body obeys. But if that's true, if this is all in our heads, how do you explain the synchronized timing? How do you explain people dying in perfect clusters, like unseen hands are checking names off a list? There's something else. A leaked memo from one of the medical teams. It claims they found something unusual in the victims' brains. A resonance, a frequency, barely detectable but identical in every case. It's not coming from inside their bodies. It's coming from outside. Something broadcasting directly into the human nervous system, speaking a language too old for words, too deep for understanding. And if that frequency is tied to the fourth seal, to the Pale Rider himself, then this isn't just death. It's a summons. Stay with me. Because this frequency, it's still playing. And if you can hear my voice, it might already be inside you too. The scientists gave their answer. Apocalypse syndrome, a failure of the mind so complete that the body simply lets go. But the religious leaders, they're not buying it. Within minutes of the medical briefings, every religious broadcast still on air erupted with a single unified message. This isn't psychological collapse, it's divine judgment. The fourth seal opened, death riding through the streets, collecting souls already weighed and found lacking. They point to the faces of the dead, the peace, the quiet surrender, not as a symptom, but a sign. They say these people didn't die because they lost hope. They died because their fate was sealed the moment the prophecy began. Some faith leaders are calling for repentance, urgent prayers blasting across shortwave and pirate frequencies, begging anyone who can still hear to fall to their knees and ask for mercy before the fifth seal breaks. Others, the darker voices, say it's too late for prayers, that this isn't a warning anymore, it's a harvest. Every breath left in your lungs, they say, is just borrowed time. And the weight of your soul has already been measured. For centuries, we treated prophecy like poetry, metaphor wrapped in fear. But now, Scripture isn't interpreted, it's reported. And whether you believe or not, the prophecy believes in you. We just got our hands on a document. Not through official channels, Not from some press release, but from someone inside the system who's been sitting on it for years. It's labeled Event Omega Protocol. A classified briefing circulated between military intelligence, top scientists, and a select few world leaders. The first page alone is enough to shatter everything we thought we knew. It confirms the prophecy, not as religious superstition, but as anticipated reality. For decades, they knew something was coming. Not just climate collapse or nuclear war, but something scripted, tied directly to the Book of Revelation. Event Omega wasn't a contingency plan. It was a countdown, a set of procedures triggered the moment the first seal broke. Not to stop it, but to control the narrative, to manage belief itself. The memo mentions cultural pacification strategies, feeding scientific half-truths to the public, while religious channels were quietly encouraged to embrace prophecy, letting both sides cancel each other out while the real systems locked into place. It even references frequency manipulation, the very signal interference we've been experiencing since this all began. The static, the whispers, the hooves, none of it accidental. It was all part of the script. They knew, and instead of stopping it, they turned it into policy. The final page is stamped with a single phrase: prepare for the return of the ancient frequency. If you're still listening, you need to understand the apocalypse isn't happening to us. It's been broadcast to us on a channel we were never meant to hear. Here's the part no one can explain. Sometime during the last 2 hours, while we were talking about death and prophecy and the collapse of everything, world leaders started vanishing. Not just hiding, not just evacuating, vanishing. Their final addresses, those reassuring scripted speeches meant to keep us calm, they were interrupted. In every case, the feed cut to a scrambled emergency broadcast, and when the image returned, they were gone. Their security teams couldn't explain it. No breach, no attack, they simply disappeared mid-sentence. What replaced them? That's the part that chills me to my bones. The emergency broadcast didn't return to news anchors or military commanders. They started playing something else. An ancient voice speaking a language no living government uses. Aramaic. I didn't recognize it at first, but one of our translators did. Aramaic. The language spoken when the original prophecies were first written. The message itself was fractured, broken by static, but one phrase repeated over and over until the broadcast cut to silence. The throne is no longer empty. No one knows what it means. Not yet, but if you've been following the prophecy, you already feel it, don't you? The fourth seal wasn't just about death. It was about the transfer of power, the moment the old rulers disappeared, and something older took their place. And now the airwaves don't belong to us anymore. If you're still listening, hold on tight, because whatever's about to speak next, it's not speaking to us. It's speaking for us. Absolutely. Shaz, here's the fully developed immersive script for, if you're hearing this, it means I'm still here. For now. It's just me now. The only voice left on this frequency. My co-hosts are gone. The newsroom, empty. The phone lines, once lit up with fear and fury, are dead quiet. Even the emergency feeds, the lifeline connecting us to whatever's left of the world, silent. I've been broadcasting into nothing for hours, maybe longer. Time doesn't move the same way anymore. Not since the last seal broke. It's like reality itself is exhaling, and we're caught between breaths. I used to fill these airwaves with news and weather. Now all I have to offer is my own voice. A voice cracking under the weight of too much silence. I've heard stories about radio hosts who stayed on air during hurricanes, wildfires, even wars, holding the line until their station went dark. But this isn't a storm or a war. This is the end of the story itself. And all I can do is talk to the silence and hope something is still listening. If you can hear me, if your hands are trembling like mine, stay with me, because I have to tell you what's outside. And once you know, you won't ever unknow it. Before I tell you what I see now, I need you to remember how we got here. I need you to remember the first seal, the quiet one, the whisper beneath the static, the white horse riding in not with war but with influence, conquest without a single bullet fired. Then came the second seal, Hamchi, the red horse, the sword in the sky, neighbors turning to enemies overnight. War wasn't declared. It grew from inside us like it had been waiting in our bones. Then the third seal, famine, hunger carving us down to instincts until the difference between man and animal disappeared, and the marked ones, the silent ones, who walked through the chaos untouched, already claimed by something we couldn't see, the fourth seal, the pale rider, death not with violence, but with a whisper, heart stopping mid-breath, soul surrendering without struggle, as if death had stepped into our homes and we welcomed it inside. I told you all of this. I watched it unfold through this microphone, relayed every broken report, every trembling voice, every desperate prayer, and now, as I sit here alone, my own voice is just another confession. I didn't think I'd live long enough to see the fifth, and yet here I am. One man speaking into the void, clinging to the sound of his own voice just to prove he's still here. But the silence is getting crowded. I can't see the street anymore. The fog rolled in hours ago, thick enough to erase the world outside the window. But even through the mist, I can see them. Figures, standing perfectly still, tall, wrapped in cloaks that seem older than cloth itself. There are no faces, no hands visible beneath the folds, just presence, a weight that bends the air around them. They don't move, they don't knock, they just watch. A silent congregation waiting for something to begin. At first, I thought they were the marked ones, the silent survivors who walk through riots untouched. But the longer I look, the clearer it becomes. These are not survivors. These are witnesses. They've been waiting a long time for this. Longer than any of us have been alive. Maybe longer than the world itself. I can't explain how I know. But I do. They're not here to end the story. They're here to watch us understand it. And I think, God help me, I think they're waiting for me to stop talking. As if the final silence, the moment this microphone goes dead, is the last note they've been waiting to hear. But I'm not done yet, because there's one more seal. And if you've come this far with me, you need to hear what's coming next. Stay with me, if you can. Hold on. There's something cutting through the static. It's faint, broken, frayed at the edges. But it's there. It's coming from one of the UN emergency bunkers, one of the last fallback sites they built to outlive anything. Nuclear war, biological collapse, even this. I shouldn't be able to hear them. Their transmissions run on isolated frequencies, sealed off from civilian airwaves. But something's pushed their signal through. The voices aren't normal. They sound layered, like more than one voice is speaking at once, overlapping itself. It's not a distress call. They're not asking for help. They're just repeating the same sentence, over and over, like it's the only thing left they can say. The Lamb has left the throne. I know what that means. You know what that means. Even if you've never opened a Bible in your life, you feel it in your bones. That throne, the one meant to hold back the flood, it's empty now. The hand that held the seals closed has let go. I tried to patch through to the bunker to answer them, to ask if anyone's still alive down there, but the line cut off the moment the message ended. No coordinates, no context, just those words, burned into the silence like a scar. The Lamb has left the throne. If you think that's the end of the message, you're wrong, because something else is about to speak next. I need to say this out loud, and I need you to hear me, even if it doesn't make sense. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I've spent the last few days reporting the truth, or if I've been dragging you down into my own breakdown, one broadcast at a time. Maybe there were no seals, no riders, no prophecy at all. Maybe this was always just a storm, a disaster like any other. And the isolation, the silence, the static, it all just got to me. But then I look outside, and the figures are still there. I try to explain them away. Maybe they're refugees. Maybe they're survivors looking for shelter. But they don't move. They don't call out. They just watch, like they've been watching long before I noticed. And the whispers in the static, I can't tell if they're coming from outside or inside my own skull anymore. I want to believe this is hysteria. That would mean it's human, treatable, temporary. But if those figures are real, if they're standing outside your window too, then this isn't madness. It's witness. Because I'm not the only one seeing them, am I? You've seen them too. Maybe not outside your house, but in your dreams, in the corner of your eye, when the power flickered, in the silence between breaths. They're not just here for me. They're here for all of us. And I think they're waiting for me to stop talking. The door just creaked. It's never done that before, not in all my years sitting in this booth. I didn't open it. No one's left to open it. But something wants in. I could stop talking. I could cut the feed, let the static take over, hide in the corner, and hope whatever's on the other side goes away. But I won't, because you deserve to hear this. You stayed with me. Through every seal, every whisper, every impossible truth. And if this is the end, if this is the moment the broadcast becomes the prophecy, you deserve to hear it all the way through. The door is opening. Slowly, deliberately, like it knows I have nowhere left to run. And behind the door, there's no figure, no face, just light. Not warm, not cold, just absolute. The mic is starting to hum, a deep low pulse crawling through the frequency, like something ancient waking up. I can't hear myself anymore. My voice is gone. All that's left is the sound. The one we've been waiting for since the beginning. A single clear trumpet blast. It's not music, it's not warning, it's the sound of a door closing, the one between what we believed and what was always waiting beneath it. This is the final broadcast. If you can still hear me, remember, if you can still hear me, that means the signal found you. Maybe it's just you now, alone in a dark room, like I was. Or maybe you're surrounded by people pretending nothing's wrong, turning up the volume just enough to drown out the silence creeping in behind their own thoughts. Either way, you heard this story, and that means you're part of it now. I need you to think about this. Every prophecy starts as a warning, but warnings only work if someone remembers what they were supposed to fear. So I'll ask you the only question that matters now. What if the seals never broke at all? What if the real apocalypse isn't something that came crashing down from the sky, but something that's always been here, buried just deep enough that we forgot to look? And now that you've remembered, what will you do to forget again? Tell me in the comments. What do you believe broke first? The seals or our own minds? And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that make you question what's real, and what's been hiding inside your silence all along, subscribe. Share this broadcast with someone you trust. Not just because they need to hear it, but because some memories deserve to be shared before they disappear completely. This is VoiceCast signing off, or maybe waking up. Either way, you're not alone. Not anymore.